All right, for lecture number 11 here, we're going to talk about immunizations, some of the different types. Now, we've already talked about this. We talked about how immunity can be divided up into active and passive, and mainly thinking about humoral immunity here. This involves your antibodies. And you have active immunity, you have passive immunity. Active immunity means your own immune system has been stimulated to respond. Passive means you're getting pre-manufactured antibodies. And then active immunity can be divided up into naturally acquired and artificially acquired. Naturally acquired active immunity is where you get exposed to something that's foreign to the body and your immune system responds, and then you develop immunity to it through the memory that we talked about. Artificially acquired, this is a vaccine or a vaccination where you artificially are given a version of the microbe or molecules of the microbe to artificially stimulate your own immune system to respond. But your own immune system responds and you develop your own memory and immunity to it. Over on the passive side, naturally acquired passive immunity means you are receiving pre-made antibodies from your mother, either across the placenta while you're still in the womb or in her breast milk. Artificially acquired passive immunity, this is a version where you get pre-made antibodies. You're not making your own. They were manufactured previously and they're being injected inside you in large amounts. So these artificial type processes are referred to as immunizations. And there are two types. Active immunizations are over here, the active side of humoral immunity. Oh, one of my daughters is going crazy. They know my daughters are about to get home from school, so they have little internal clocks. They just know that these things are about to happen. Active immunizations, these are what we call vaccinations or vaccines. These help prevent diseases, and you're artificially being allowed to meet a microbe without actually getting sick from it, but you get the positive benefits of developing immunity to it. And again, these are used to prevent diseases. Passive immunizations are not as common, and this is often where you've already been exposed to a pathogen. It's in the process of making you sick, like say the rabies virus. You don't have time to wait around for your own immune system to make its own antibodies to help you clear out that virus. So instead, you are given pre-manufactured antibodies. And sometimes those have been manufactured in human volunteers. Sometimes they've been manufactured in animals and purified and given to you. You don't get any memory from these types of immunizations. The antibodies don't last forever. Eventually they decompose and they're removed through the usual processes in your body that get rid of wastes. All right, so let's talk about these guys over here, your active immunizations, for a few minutes. These are your vaccinations, and there are different types that you can receive. A number of vaccines that we get, actually a surprising number, are called live attenuated vaccines. They don't often tell you this when you're receiving these vaccines, but live and attenuated, you're actually getting a live microorganism when you receive one of these types of vaccines, but attenuated means it's weakened, it's no longer capable of making you sick. Under most conditions, now if you have a very weak immune system for some reason, like let's say you're a cancer patient and you're receiving chemotherapy, or maybe you're an AIDS patient, you have very weak immunity. Now in those cases, these types of vaccines could potentially make you ill. That's why you don't get these types of vaccinations when you have those kinds of conditions. So there's some sort of a weakened strain of the live microbe, so they have the same antigens, the same molecules on their surfaces, or they make their own molecules that look just like those of the pathogenic strains. The pathogenic strains are the ones that can cause disease, but they're not able to harm you. So you still mount your own immune responses. You react to these vaccine viruses or bacteria, you clear them out, and now you've got memory. So the next time if you ever actually get exposed to the disease-causing version, you're going to generate your own antibodies. Now, these also stimulate your T cells, so you'll wind up with memory T cells that will become activated as well, that will help you clear out some of these pathogens. So these are generally really good vaccines. You usually don't need as many boosters with these. And some examples, the intranasal flu vaccines that are given at times. The measles, mumps, rubella. Rubella is German measles, that vaccine that's given to all kids. That's another example of one of these types of vaccines as well. And they are safe. They've been very thoroughly tested. However, in some cases, you have to be careful around people who have weakened immunity for some reason, because they could become infected with those vaccine viruses and bacteria. All right, not all vaccines we receive have live active versions of the microbes. Some are called killed whole agent vaccines, and this is where you're getting whole bacteria or whole viruses, but they've been killed or inactivated. And they're kind of frozen in place. Their structures, their three-dimensional structures, have been preserved. So they still look like the virus or the bacteria to your immune system. Their antigens are still present, and those are going to stimulate. B cells will get activated, and they'll start cranking out antibodies, and you'll develop memory to this microbe, whatever it may be. And so if you ever actually get exposed to the real thing, you'll be able to respond to it with your adaptive immune system very, very quickly and clear it out before it's able to make you sick. Then there are some other vaccines called subunit vaccines. And a subunit vaccine, so if you imagine, let's see. Let's say we've got a virus here. Let's say this is HBV, hepatitis B virus. Hepatitis B virus has different kinds of molecules in its surface. And so instead, with a killed whole agent vaccine, you would be getting that whole virus particle, you know, a whole bunch of copies of that virus particle. It's no longer active, it's dead and preserved, but all of its little three-dimensional antigens are preserved in place. With a subunit vaccine, you might only be getting these molecules, these proteins, you know, one or two of them, or maybe even three of them, not the whole intact virus. You're just getting pieces, and those are still antigens of the virus, so your immune system can react to those. And then if you ever get exposed to the real hepatitis B virus, you'll still be able to make antibodies that attach to those molecules on the surface of a real virus, and that's going to help you clear away those viruses before they can make you ill. The hepatitis B virus vaccination that is given to a lot of people is this type of vaccine. This one, a good example of this is the polio vaccine that all little kids get, the injected type. That is a killed whole agent vaccine. Now, if you're now up until about 15, 16 years ago, I think they were still given the oral polio virus vaccine where they squirted it in your mouth and you swallowed it. And that was actually a live attenuated version of polio virus. They don't tell you that, but that's what you were actually getting, a live version of the polio virus. It just wasn't able to cause a polio virus infection that would paralyze you like the real pathogenic type of polio virus can. There is an additional type of vaccination called a toxoid vaccine, like you see on here. And what a toxoid is, many bacterial pathogens. So, you know, most bacteria we get exposed to don't make us sick. It's just a small minority that are capable of causing disease in our bodies. But many of the ones that do, they secrete toxins. And so these include things like tetanus, for example, makes tetanus toxin, which freezes your muscles in place. Is a toxic molecule. It's actually a protein that tetanus bacteria secrete, and it paralyzes your muscles. the bacteria that cause botulism secrete botulism toxin, also called botulinum toxin or Botox, and it relaxes muscles. In either case, you can wind up dying from either too much muscle paralysis or too much muscle relaxation, preventing you from breathing. But anyway, so in a lot of cases with bacterial infections, it's actually their toxins that cause you the most problem, that wind up damaging us. So there are vaccines that are called toxoids. And so basically what these are, I found this little diagram online. If that is an evil toxin that can damage you that's made by bacteria, a toxoid has been slightly modified so that it's no longer capable of damaging you in any way. But your immune system still sees this as the toxin. And what they're trying to show you, a toxin is a molecule. It's usually a protein molecule. And so there are three-dimensional shapes on these proteins that you can make antibodies to. Your immune system can detect those. Those are antigens, and you can make antibodies to them. So the toxoid version over here still has a number of those antigens on the surface that you can make antibodies to. So you get the toxoid as a vaccination, you wind up generating these antibodies, and you have memory to this toxoid, so that if you ever get exposed to the real thing over here, your antibodies get made very quickly, and they can attach to and tag the toxins, so they wind up getting cleared out of your body, and they're no longer able to make you sick. So those are called toxoid vaccines. Here's a picture of a box that contains tetanus toxoid vaccine in it. That's what you get as part of the DTaP series of shots. That's included. Tetanus toxoid is included in that when you get a DTaP shot when you're a kid. The D in DTaP stands for diphtheria toxin. So diphtheria is a really severe respiratory infection that used to kill a lot of little kids, and it's caused by bacteria that secrete a toxin called diphtheria toxin. So you get vaccinated in the same shot with diphtheria toxoid and tetanus toxoid that resemble the real toxins and stimulate you to develop immunity to those toxins. And so when you actually get exposed to the real bacteria, you're able to get rid of those toxins before they can harm you. Unfortunately, toxoid vaccines, the memory doesn't last all that long, and so you wind up having to get boosters pretty frequently. That's the nail, and you're an adult. Your doctor's probably going to ask you, well, when's the last time you had a tetanus shot? Because they're going to try to boost up your own antibody production against the tetanus toxin, just in case, to prevent you from getting that disease. Now, passive immunizations, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, these are not the same as active. You're actually getting pre-made antibodies. An active immunization or a vaccine or vaccination, you're making your own antibodies. In many cases, you're stimulating your own T cells as well. Passive immunization, different. You're artificially being given large amounts of pre-made antibodies. This is what you get if you've been bitten by a snake or a spider and you get an anti-venom or an anti-venin. That's what they're giving you. They're giving you large amounts of pre-made antibodies that float around in your body fluids, and they find the venom molecules and attach to them, and that tags them for destruction, and your phagocytic cells will ingest them and digest them and destroy them. Or if you've ever heard about anybody getting rabies shots, you know, because they've been bitten by a rabid animal, that's what they're doing. They're flooding your body fluids with lots of antibodies to rabies virus, and that way you don't have time to wait around for your own body to make its own antibodies to rabies virus. You'll be dead before that happens in all likelihood. Okay, there is a different version. Let's say, now we just talked about the tetanus toxoid vaccine. That's preventing you from getting tetanus, but let's say you already have signs of tetanus. Usually they occur in the facial muscles first, and sometimes it's called lockjaw because your jaw muscles are frozen into a contracted state. So at that point, you're not going to get a tetanus toxoid injection, because that would stimulate your own immune system to make its own antibodies, and you don't have time. That takes several days to happen. You don't have time to wait around for that. You'll be dead from tetanus by the time that happens. So instead, if you already are showing signs of getting tetanus, they'll give you large amounts of pre-made antibodies to the tetanus toxin that will float through your body fluids and soak up that toxin and help you clear it out. Or when we talked about hemolytic disease of the newborn, remember if you have an Rh negative mama and she's carrying an Rh positive fetus the first time she's pregnant, they'll give the mother RhoGAM, and what they're doing is they're injecting her with antibodies, pre-made antibodies, that will, if during childbirth or earlier some of the fetus's Rh positive cells get into her blood or body fluids, those antibodies will attach to them and clear those cells out of her body. And the idea there is you're trying to prevent the mother from being able to make her own antibodies against Rh. Because if she gets pregnant again with an Rh positive fetus and she's making antibodies to Rh, those then go inside the fetus and attach to the fetus's red blood cells, because that's where you find your Rh factor or your Rh antigens. And those red blood cells can wind up actually bursting due to that process. So those are some examples of passive immunizations. The last lecture we're going to hit some highlights on a few homeostatic imbalances of the immune system, and then that is going to conclude Unit 3.